Welcome to Break Bias. I'm your host, Brad Kramer. It's the 58th episode, and I'm here ahead of one of the weekends I look forward to the most. Of course, that is the Canadian Grand Prix. But before I preview the action with a special guest at the circuit, Gilles Villeneuve, first, a quick reminder, as ever, check out the link in the description, guys. It has links to my pages, like all the platforms you could find this podcast, and then, of course, my YouTube channel, my Break Bias Twitter account, and my TikTok. It has my email address if you'd like to contact me about anything, as well as just my personal pages, my Brad Kramer Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, if you will. But now, let's not waste any time and get into my chat with a Canadian racing expert, and more importantly, a friend of the podcast, Tim Hauraney. I hope you guys enjoy this chat. I now welcome a special guest. It's his third time on Break Bias. He has his own podcast called Nailing the Apex, a great show, by the way. He's frequently on TSN to break down the latest on both F1 and IndyCar, and he's a former driver himself. He is Tim Hauraney. How are you doing?
Good, Bradley. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Pretty good. Yeah, I always appreciate your time. First of all, I wanted to just quickly say this, because the last time we chatted, you scolded me a bit for not watching IndyCar.
Yeah.
And I will admit that I actually am getting into it a bit more. I'm also trying to watch a bit more F2 as well, trying to broaden my motorsport palette a little bit, I guess, but still a long way to go there.
Okay,
But
so thoughts on IndyCar?
man, it has some fantastic racing. I
Yeah.
will say that. I just watched the highlights. I didn't catch the race for it was the Detroit Grand Prix that
Yep.
was most recent, right? Yeah, like the battles for the lead between Palou and Power, I believe, right? Like brilliant stuff. I love that. So yeah, I'm definitely trying to watch it some more because, as you said, the racing is brilliant. But I wanted to ask you, as I know you love IndyCar.
Well, I used to race
So
there, right? Like
well, yeah, of course,
that's
yeah.
where I used to. That's where I used to race. Like, I mean, being part of like the Renault driver development program, like me and a handful of other folks from Canada and the United States who ever got that opportunity. And my career wasn't really going in the direction of Formula One. We never had the finances, and so we were able to get North American funding to go and race like in the IndyCar ladder system and do all that fun stuff with IndyCar. And it's honestly, it's incredible racing. It's super hard. It's kind of barbaric in some sense, but you make a mistake on their tracks and you pay for it big time. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little different, obviously, than from some European like racing categories, but I would say the past few seasons, IndyCar has had the most competitive driver lineup in the world, and I would also go on to say that, I mean, their races on track, the on track entertainment is the best in the world. Like IndyCar, like just racing. I mean, the marketing side's a different story, and the off track spectacle is a different story. But like,
Yeah.
on track competition is out of this world. It's the closest racing in the world. I mean, yeah, it's so much fun to watch. I don't know how if you can't get into watching IndyCar, if you're a motorsports fan, like I just
Yeah.
doesn't translate to me.
Yeah, no, it really is brilliant. There was some things that I had to learn, like what primary and alternate was at the beginning, and just some of the tracks are, like you said, just insane. Like the Detroit one is pretty crazy. Like one mistake and you're in the wall, like
Oh
no
yeah,
question about it. And they're racing so tight on
oh
such a
yeah.
tight little track. It's wild, but
Like hard into the wall too, Bradley. Like,
oh
you
yeah, they're
pound, like
concrete.
pound that wall. Like it's just,
Yeah,
oh my God, like bone rattling racetracks is what they race on sometimes. Like the track in Toronto is so bumpy, dude. Like I remember racing on it back in like whatever it was, 06, 07, whatever the year was, my last time on it, and it was like rough. And then I kind of went back a couple years ago, before the pandemic, and I was like, oh my God, how are these cars not falling apart right now? Like it's just brutal. Like but it's awesome. I mean, it's great racing. I love it.
well, one question on IndyCar, I guess, first. The Indy 500, I'm sure I think I have mostly F1 fans. I don't know how many of my listeners watch IndyCar either, but if they tuned into any race, it would have been the 500. I have to ask, what do you made of that kind of last lap or last couple laps decision there? I'm sure this was well covered on your podcast.
Yeah, like I think you're talking about the dragon technique that that Newgarden used, that coming out of the last corner where he
Well, also,
circled down into pit lane and came out of it type deal. Is that what you mean?
well, yeah, but also weren't people pretty critical of the decision?
Uh,
Like, I think Ericsson was pretty upset that they actually
yeah,
had like a last lap
it's,
race,
give me a
right?
break. Like everybody's
Okay.
like, come on. Like the thing with IndyCar is that like they have they don't have a rotating staff of stewards. Like it's the same race officials every race they go to. So the way that the races are called by like race control and race officials is consistent, and you're going to have consistency because you have the same folks and doing the same jobs. Where I mean, F1's a little bit different, right? They have a rotating cast of stewards for every single weekend. So sometimes calls are not as consistent. And I think for F1 drivers, that makes things a little more frustrating. But in the case of IndyCar, I mean, I'm 100% on board with what they did. Like you have 400,000 people there. The race is sold out. Nobody wants to see this thing end behind a safety car. I mean, you've been watching spectacular racing all day. Why would you want to sit there and watch this thing end under a safety car? Like it's like all you got to do is what they did: throw the red on it, and away you go. I mean, the only thing that could be an issue is obviously with Ericsson, cold tires, yes, but like these guys are professionals. Like they know they've done so many laps on IMS at up to this point that they know what the cold tire is going to feel like. They know what the car is going to do, and so they know what they can do with it. The problem with Ericsson is he's a sitting duck.
Yeah.
He's leading the race. That's going to allow Joseph Newgarden, if he's brave enough, you got to go flat out through turn two, like the short shoot into two. You got to go flat through there, which he did, because it was either he was going to do that or the car was coming home in a ball, right? And he did what he had to do. And the thing is that Ericsson's punching a hole in the air. Newgarden's going to take advantage of him, and that's how it went down. And look, I mean, could here's the other thing, right? Like, could and I haven't really talked about this, but if Marcus Ericsson doesn't do his dragon technique thing last year to win the Indy 500, do you
Yeah.
think Joseph Newgarden does it this year to win the Indy 500? Because I guarantee you, if Marcus Ericsson doesn't do that move last year, Joseph Newgarden doesn't do it this year, Marcus Ericsson's probably going to be your winner this year, which means he would have won it twice.
That's interesting
Think
thought.
about that
And
for a sec. Think about that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
There
that
you
is
go.
interesting.
Because he set the standard, and the officials didn't penalize him for it last year.
Yep.
And so Joe News like, well, hell of it. Like I'm going to do exactly what he did because he didn't get penalized, so I'm going to do it too. And so what that
Yep.
allows him to do is that allows Joseph to break the toe. So break the
Hmm.
wind that's coming off of his car. And that's going to put Marcus in a compromised position because he's now getting all the wind hitting his car, which is going to slow him down, breaking the toe. Essentially, he's not going to be able to get by.
Yeah.
There you
And
go.
doing that on an F1 straight is like considered an atrocity, basically. But
Well,
uh,
yeah, I mean, like that's, I mean, because like then you got to look at it. Is Erickson or sorry, is Newgarden at that point? How many moves is he making,
yeah,
or is he just moving his car before Erickson has had a chance to move his?
yeah, yeah. Well, it
Right.
definitely was weaving to break the toe, as you said, and Ericsson just trying to follow him and
And he went over the pit lane like
yeah, that was kind of the
solid
sketchy
white
part.
line. Like,
Yeah,
and that's where I'm like, I think, like, I mean, all fair game, right? Like, they even talked about it. That I mean, we spoke to the drivers about this exact scenario happening. We spoke to the drivers about it a few days before the Indy 500 even started, and they were all like, "Yeah, we're gonna do it. We got to do it." Like, IndyCar wasn't going to penalize it. They had let the drivers know that they weren't going to do anything about it, and away they went and did their thing. But now looking forward, I mean, I don't see how they let this keep happening. Like, I really don't. I think it turns into a penalty next year.
Oh,
That's
interesting.
what I
Well,
don't think they can do, but because it's like
yeah,
you got to think of like the safety factor and all this too, right? Like you're having
for
cars
sure.
like heading down pit lane
If yeah, like if it could
at
something
240
could
miles an
roll
hour.
right in there, right? Yeah, I guess. But well,
So
it
I don't
certainly
know.
yeah, it certainly did make for a great spectacle at the end. I was curious what you thought, and I agree with you. I think it was definitely better to have that last lap of racing. But I have to get to this point. New news with you. You are no longer the host of the TSN Racing Pod. You have the Nailing the Apex podcast. Uh, now you've joined the Steve Dangle Podcast Network. Just tell me about that. What happened there, and what made you join SDPN?
Well, I found Bradley with like the TSN Racing Pod. It was great. I had a ton of fun doing it. I was producing everything. Um, and it was taking a while, and I had like other things like that I had to do that were like it really required my attention, and so I felt like I wasn't putting the amount of effort that I should have been putting into that podcast. And so I thought, okay, well, coming into 2023, I'm not gonna do a podcast this year because I'm going to be extra busy doing other things, and so that needs my attention over the podcast. And it had a big following, but I also was like, God, it sucks. I don't want to leave those people without any content. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I have to do this over here. And it was interesting. I Adam Wild from the SDPN. I didn't know Adam, and he and I started chatting in November 2022, and he kept talking to me about doing a podcast for them, and I was kind of like, look, I got my own thing here, and I'm like, honestly, it's just been taking me a long time to kind of um get through it, and I don't think I'm going to do one next year. And then they came back to me in January, and they're like, hey, like we got an idea, and they pitched me the idea, and I was like, well, okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't have to put like a whole ton of time into it. I can just show up and hit record and talk about some racing, and then I can leave. And yeah, they've been really great to work with. I mean, everyone I've been able to work with, like with TSN, have been incredible. Everybody I've been able to work with the SDPM people, they've been incredible too. And I think, for me, I'm extremely fortunate to get these opportunities. And yeah, I'm having a blast, man. It's a lot of fun. Like doing both things has been a riot, man. Like, and it's just kind of like I know how fortunate I am, and it's kind of like I'm a eternal optimist at times, but like yeah, I'm excited to see where it all goes, because racing in Canada is like really starting to turn into this like
Yeah,
huge friggin' thing. And I wasn't, my goal, back in like 2013 when I first started in the media industry and pushing racing and pushing Formula One and all that kind of stuff, it was always to grow motorsports in Canada. But it's been growing so fast, and like the podcast is big in the USA. Like it's pretty big in
yeah.
Canada, but like it's big in the USA. And I'm like, oh wow, reaching a lot of people here. And then it's also big over in Europe as well. Like we have listeners from like we have a global fan base that is tuned in to listen to Nailing the Apex. And it's like, yeah, I'm just so fortunate to get these opportunities. It's been great, man. I'm having a great time.
Yeah, well, you do a great job. I love the new show. I recommend it to anyone who listens to this podcast to check it out. I saw that you just had a chat though with Haas team principal Gunther Steiner. How
I did.
awesome is that? How
Yeah.
was that?
Oh, it was great. I mean, Haas set that up. They were intrigued, and yeah, so we moved forward and we set something up. And Gunther was great. I mean, I've interviewed Gunther many times in the past, and just to get a chance to chat with him again one on one, it's always fun because I'm always learning something from him. I always find that with Gunther, everybody always like laughs at him or with him or whatever, but he's actually like he's a very intelligent man. Like
Oh, for sure.
he is extremely intelligent and hardworking. Like this guy works. I thought I worked hard. Like this guy works, dude. Like he's flying from North Carolina all the way to the next race, then back to the factory, like in and around the UK, or he's going up to Maranello, where another part of their factory is.
Hmm.
Sorry, excuse me. He's flying to Banbury, then he's like either up in Maranello or whatever, or he's over at Steiner Ranch in North Carolina with his family. Like he's all over the place. He's never not sitting in one place. It is wild. His book. I don't know if you've had a chance to read it yet, Bradley, but his book Surviving to Drive is worth buying. I bought the book and then I bought the Audible, and
Yeah.
like the book's incredible, but the Audible's even better because he's actually talking to you. And so like I'll go on these long bike rides up north. Like I'll go for like 3-4 hour bike rides, and like I'll be listening to, sometimes I listen to books, and like I listened to his book, and it's like it was about 7 hours, so it took me about three rides or so to get through it, but it felt like he was there with me on the ride.
Yeah.
It was just incredible, and it's like it's journal entries. So he's literally walking you through his day to day and what he's actually doing in the day, and sometimes what he's like even eating, like where is he going, what is he do. It is so cool because like you're
Yeah. Unique look at
literally,
his life. Yeah.
yeah, and you're in his head. Like he's talking to you while you're doing whatever you're doing. Like for me, I was riding my bike. He felt like he was with me while I was riding my bike, and he's telling me all these stories. I'm like, oh my god, this is incredible, right? I'm so entertained. Like, yeah, it's if you're a fan of his, or you're a fan of Formula One, it's worth it. It's definitely worth your money. And yeah, he was great on nailing the apex on Thursday, and had a lot of fun chatting with him as well. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah,
It's
a
pretty
special
cool.
life anyone in F1 must live, and to just get like a little piece of that would be awesome. But you did some traveling recently. I saw that you went down to Miami to
I
cover
did.
that race. How was that? Was that the first time you did that? I don't remember you being in Miami last year. Did you actually were you there last
Yeah.
year too?
So yeah, TSN sent us last year,
Oh, okay.
and it was. I mean, it was the first time for the Miami Grand Prix last year, and like the biggest stars in the world were there. Like Tom Brady was there, David
Yeah,
Beckham was there, Dwayne Wade and his wife were there, Michael Jordan was there, the first lady was there, like Barack Obama's wife was there, like
wild.
gee, like, anybody and everybody was there. It was awesome, and it was like the race wasn't that good, but like the off track spectacle was incredible, man. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And for this year, I mean, TSN had seen what a great job we did last year. They were like, yeah, we're gonna send you again because you guys like crushed it. And so we went back, and this time like we did even more. Like it was like we did a lot. We raised our game
I
even
see.
more. We like TSN and I, like we were working every hour was like accounted for. Like we were, it was 8 a.m. We were probably at the track 8 or 9 a.m. We were at the track, and every single hour we were there, we were doing stuff all the way through till like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, sometimes like later. Like we were there like almost 12, 13 hours sometimes. Like,
Well, that must be why I saw you. I guess you were working around the clock. But
oh
please
man,
tell
it's
me
great.
you're doing the same in Vegas this year.
I hope so. I hope we get to go. I'm going to the British Grand Prix, and going to be going to Texas again because Texas is one of my favorite Formula
Awesome.
One races to go to.
Same.
Aside from like, honestly, aside from Canada, I would say Texas is number two because that is awesome, man. Like even the stuff that's happening off track in Austin, there's always something going down, dude. It is so much fun, and the race is always good. Like you never really get a bad race at Coda. Like I don't really remember too many like really boring races there. And I would say, yeah, be going to that one, and then I'm going to Mexico, hopefully Vegas, and then I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do for the year, like after. If I kind of want to go to like open testing when it starts, like preseason testing, and I kind of want to be
Oh,
there for the
okay.
first race of the season. So we'll see. Those are just ideas I've been throwing up in the air. So
Awesome. Well, I hope you get to Vegas because I'm
Oh yeah, me
sure
too.
that
It'd
will
be great.
be quite the party.
Yeah, it'd be pretty
but
awesome, man.
but the first party has to happen in Montreal. That's what we're here to talk about. And I think I asked you this question last year. But I just feel like it's always so cool, especially with us being Canadian. This weekend is universally loved by fans, teams, drivers alike. Why is that?
I think like one of the things is it's such a like it's a classic, if that makes any sense. Like, and it is like a traditional. Well, it's pretty close to a traditional racetrack because it's been there for so long, and the only thing they really needed to do was improve on a few safety things. But it's a driver's track still. You have technical bits, but you also have some big commitment bits, and I think for the drivers, they love that, and the sense that the track is like a go-kart track for them. They can really use the curbs where at other races they can't really use the curbs because the way they're built. With Canada, the curbs are a unique way where some of them they can just jump right over, and like that's kind of like karting. And when I raced there, I always felt the same way. Like there were some curves you could kind of hit and nail them, and there were some curbs you kind of had to stay away from, and you can really beatbox the car around, which is what I loved. And I'm sure they're the same way. The atmosphere on top of that is probably the other thing. Like this race is packed, man. Like they get 400,000 people for the entire weekend, and like it's sold out again this year. I mean, getting onto the island is cool if you're a driver because you come down off the off ramp and you're heading into the park itself, and there's fans lined up along the bridge like waiting to like see if they can look in the car and see if you're in there, right? And you drive by like this army of fans. There's just so many people passing, like you're passing so many people as you're driving into the track, and they're all looking at the cars to see. And so I always like stick my phone out of the car and like videotape them as I go by, like waving to everybody and stuff. And like I don't want them to think I'm like a driver or anything, but it's like I just think it's so cool, man. And then the nightlife on top of it is great. I mean, Montreal does it right. They have things happening all over the city, and it's tough to drive around the city. It's better to walk during the Grand Prix weekend, but there's parties, there's good food everywhere, all across Montreal. It is awesome. The entire city just shuts down for Grand Prix racing, and an influx of fans come from all over the world for this thing. And it's good for Canada. Like it brings in like a lot of money, man. Like I know in years past, I don't know what it is now, but years past it would bring in easily $100 million into our economy, like no question
Jeez.
asked. Like,
Yeah.
and that's people kind of like flying in, going to the Grand Prix, sticking around, and then they would travel somewhere else in Canada. Maybe they would go to Banff. Maybe they would go out to BC and check out Vancouver. Maybe they'll go to Whistler. Maybe they'll go like further out east or St. John's or whatever, right? Like they'll stick around within Canada and turn it into a full trip.
Yeah,
So
they're already
it's
here, so they might as well check out the rest, right?
yeah, exactly, right. I mean, Canada
Yeah,
does have a lot to offer. I mean, like
for sure.
it's Canada's different in that way. I find like I've traveled all over the world, but I find with Canada we have so many unique places in our country, and we have so much vast, wide open territory. And outside of that, I always say to people like you go to like if you want to be like in wilderness or you want to go outdoors or you want like hiking, surfing, skiing, um, all of those things, snowboarding in the same day, I'm like just go to Vancouver because
Yeah.
I think Vancouver on a sunny day, I think Vancouver on a sunny day is one of the most beautiful places on the face of the earth you can ever see. And it's kind of like I always tell people whenever they come to Canada, I'm always like, yeah, you want to do, I mean, every city is unique in its own way. They all offer great things, but just make sure you hit them all and make sure you get to Vancouver because it's beautiful out there too. So I
Yeah,
always tell
I've
people
been
that, man.
there, and very important point of emphasis on a sunny day because
Yes.
it's a little bit up in the air whether you're gonna get that sometimes. But
Yes.
I think we got to get into the Canadian Grand Prix. Last year, it returned after a 2-year hiatus. Max Verstappen won from Carlos Sainz. It was actually a really tight battle between them at the end. Can anyone take the fight to Red Bull this weekend, though? I think that's the $1,000,000 question, and
Um,
it's not really looking too likely. But who is the favorite to be second, at least?
yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think we haven't seen all of what the Ferraris can do with the new upgrades. I think Ferrari might be quick here in Canada this weekend coming up because they were quick here last year. I think they can get a better understanding of the race pace, not necessarily the one lap pace. And I think for like a team like Ferrari, I think what's important for them is maybe not aiming too much on that one lap pace and trying to find a better balance with all selection of tires, if that makes any sense. Because
No,
one of
for
the things
sure.
that yeah, like one of the things Ferrari was having issues with during the Spanish Grand Prix is the difference in tires. So if you look at Carlos Sainz's first stint, like he was pretty competitive, right? And then once they switched him off, I believe it was a soft compound he started on, but once they switched him off of that compound and onto another, the characteristics of the car changed. And then you started to see him start to like fall back and you saw the Mercedes start to like move forward. And I
Hamilton
think,
at the end of his soft stint was almost matching signs on
yeah,
his new tire. Yeah,
exactly,
for
right?
sure.
So there's not there's not a great amount of understanding as to why that is. And I think for Ferrari, it's trying to understand what is what what is the issue with our consistency? Why are we so inconsistent on different tire compounds at one race? Was it the weather? Was it the way we have the balance of the car, which I think that's what it is? And if we can get that issue dialed in, then what is their pace compared to the Red Bull at that point? Because I think at the end of the day, if Ferrari can honestly, if Ferrari can figure out what's what that race pace is, what it looks like, I think they claw back a bit of performance to Red Bull. And I'm not saying they claw all of it back. That's not what I'm saying. What
Yeah.
I'm saying is I think they kind of cut that deficit down where at the end of a race it's not 24-second lead, it's like maybe 10 type deal, which is a huge improvement for them. And like looking at Mercedes, I'm optimistic for them because I think the upgrades that they've brought are working, and I think they think that as well. It's whether or not the weather played a factor, and I think that's what needs to be looked at for them. Whether or not they're going to be competitive in Canada, we just have to wait and see how that all plays out.
I think it was definitely a great start for them, and the verdict might still be out a little bit just because it's only been one race. Give it some time, but I do feel like the underrated part of Red Bull's dominance this year is just how much they understand their car compared to the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari, and I guess you can throw Aston in that mix too. And tell me if I'm being too critical of Ferrari here, but of those top four teams, they seem like they definitely understand their package the least.
Yeah, I mean, you're not being too hard on them. I think that's a consensus there. I mean, it kind of seems like it anyways. They understand the one lap pace, which is why we've only seen them, qualify what like second and third, and like their gap to Red Bull during qualifying isn't it's not that big. But yeah, it's like trying to figure out what is the best balance between race pace and quali pace. And what does that look like? Because with your one lap pace, the car's just chewing through the tires immediately, but you're also getting the maximum performance out of it. But then when you look at the race, you're taking a similar that setup into the race and it's chewing through your tires. So there has to be a balance there that you can find where your race pace is going to be fast. And that's like one of the things I think, Bradley, that not a lot of people are talking about is that Red Bull's one lap pace is good, but their race pace is incredible, which means
Yes.
that they've spent most of the off season understanding what what's going to make them fast during a race. And that's what they've been working on. It's not necessarily like what's going to make us fast over one lap. It's what's going to make us fast when we get into the actual like race itself. And that's a good understanding of the tires, a good understanding of your aerodynamic platform, a good understanding of what your driver can do, and then building components around that. And I think, they've hit Adrian Newey and his staff they've hit a home run. Like
For
They
sure.
just they just have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people are talking about whether this is the most dominant car and whether they can win every single race this season. Um, and I think, like you were talking about this with Gunther, so many cars this year are struggling to make sure they're in that window of performance. When is the Red Bull ever not in their window? You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like
exactly. Like, yeah,
exactly, yeah,
they've got a good performance, right? Like sorry, they've got a good platform. So if you look at the Aston Martin, where I don't know if you ever recall hearing this, but like Fernando Alonso had spoken about it a few times, where he said we have a good platform to build from.
yeah.
And like basically that's your baseline race car that you've now got, and you need to take that with you into the future. So you're going to have that for a few years, where they have that baseline now where they can like really build upon, where Red Bull had that baseline last year, and now they're starting to improve on that, baseline, where Mercedes has gone backwards just so they can go forwards again, and Ferrari is doing something similar. They're going backwards to go forwards again. And so you're kind of like holding yourself back in that development war because of that. But if you look at what like the Red Bull um, can do with the stable platform, they're able to do more things, right? Like the weight of the car when under braking, they're designing this system where there's not a lot of like weight fluctuation from rear to the front or front to the rear, so your platform stays even stabler, which means the aerodynamics are going to work better, your ride height's going to work better, your tires are going to work better. It's just they have all of those things working together. It's really, man, it's incredible it's incredible what they've done, considering like having a sporting penalty like they've got. Like
And they
it's
basically
impressive.
have a year's advantage on everyone else because around this time Mercedes was still and Ferrari, still working on their old packages, and they've just brought these new ones where you said throughout the baseline. Red Bull's been working on their baseline since the start of the regulations, right? So um, it's going to be really hard for any team to claw back. I don't think a lot of people want to talk about it just because it's kind of depressing, but they could be easily still maintaining this advantage into a couple years from now.
Yeah.
Um,
And the
uh,
thing with the balance that I was talking to Gunther about is to give you some perspective on that is if you, how do I want to explain this? So if you look at how, well, let's use the Haas for an example, because actually it's a good example. Like Nico Hulkenberg will go out in qualifying and he'll set a blisteringly fast lap, like incredible, like one
yeah,
lap, and that's the car working well with the tire. And it's also Nico like really bringing some big time performances to the plate at the same time. But then once it gets into the race, it kind of like the car falls out of that window of balance where it's not working with different types of tires for a longer period of time. And so what that is kind of like they call it the sweet spot with the car, where it's using the tires in just the right window. But it's so particular because track temperature can change that balance, air temperature can change that balance, wind direction can also play a factor in that balance. And that's what, where you look at the Red Bull, it just has such a huge operating window that that car doesn't really worry about any of those things. Like they don't have to worry about any of those issues. And so that, to give you a better like insight into what we were kind of explaining on that, because I know maybe a little too technical for people, but essentially that's what we were talking about.
well, you bring up the Haas, a car that can qualify super well and then doesn't understand its tires in the race. What does that sound like?
Yeah, I mean Ferrari, right? Like but again, like it's not just Ferrari either. I mean, if you look at Mercedes, it's a similar type of thing problem that they've had in the past, not so much in Spain. And then what other team kind of looks like that? Alfa Romeo does as well. Alpha Tauri. I mean, they all do in all honesty, except for Red Bull and I would say Aston Martin. I think Aston Martin's just got that such a great platform. They just do, and same with obviously Red Bull. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I want to get to Aston Martin in a second because they had kind of a strange weekend in Spain. But I wanted to first ask you about this, and if you don't really know much about this or can't speak to this, that's fine. But I wanted to ask you just about Alfa Romeo. They just
Mm.
signed. McLaren or former McLaren technical
Hmm.
director James Key. Just
Hmm.
what do you know about him, and how do you see this team progressing before it becomes Audi? Because I feel like they're kind of the most anonymous team on the grid right now. I hope I'm not being too harsh on them, but I feel like that kind of is the case.
Yeah, they're inconsistent, right? And if you look at the structure that was put in place at Alfa Romeo Sauber, where Andreas Seidel left McLaren, right? The team principal from McLaren leaves in the middle, or sorry, during the winter season. And he goes over and signs this huge deal with Alfa Romeo to help them usher in Audi into 2026. You know, Andreas Seidel is a guy who worked closely with James Key, right, at McLaren. They were both at McLaren. So the guy, like, he knows him. He knows what he can do. He knows what he can bring to the table. And so it only makes sense that, this transaction happens because he is a safe pair of hands to put that job into. And that's the thing with, like, with Formula One, with anything really in life, where it's kind of like you need a lot of experience for people to trust you to do big jobs, and you have to have that experience. And with James Key, like, he's got a ton of experience. This guy's been around in Formula One, like, doing big jobs forever, right? And it's not a bad signing, I think, for Alfa Romeo. I think it's a good one because I think Andreas Seidel knows how to um, get good work out of him, because that McLaren car was pretty good a few years ago, if I remember correctly, right? And it was good last season too. It wasn't bad. It was good, actually. They're battling Alpine for fourth in the constructors. So
Yeah, for sure. And in that same vein with McLaren, how, you know, beneficial might this be bringing in someone like Rob Marshall from Red Bull?
huge. That's a big time. That's a big time move. That's like Aston Martin going to get Dan Fallows, right? From Red Bull. Like, Red Bull's kind of being cleaned out at the moment.
Just
But
not Newey.
no, yeah, no, he's not going anywhere. But that's the thing, right?
Yeah,
It's kind of like everybody learns from Newey's the top dog, and it kind of bleeds down into everybody else, right? It's, as a whole, that's kind of like how they have their system um, set up, which is the right thing to do. But these guys are going to have so much knowledge that they can bring with them, and it only makes sense. I mean, that's a great signing for McLaren. That's huge. It is. It's massive. I mean, his impact at the team will probably be felt, as soon as he, whatever the gardening leave is, I don't remember what it is, but whenever he comes off of that, the team is going to feel his impact right away. It's going to be
I
huge.
could I could be wrong. I think he's able to start basically at the
He's,
beginning of 2024.
there you go.
Um,
So
and I think McLaren has some things in the pipeline in terms of like their new wind tunnel coming in soon as well. So hopefully all these things start
yeah.
clicking at the same time.
Yeah, so the wind tunnel is operational, but they haven't put any cars in it just yet. And
Okay.
so it is working, because I spoke with Andres Stella about that, and he did say, like, I didn't ask him the question, but he did say that, like, hey, I can hear the wind tunnel firing up from my office some days when I'm sitting in my office. And he's like, it's a sign of, like, positive things happening. And I think for them, that's going to be huge. I mean, at the moment, they're shipping all of their stuff out to the out to Cologne, like to the Toyota wind tunnel, and that's a huge deal, man. Like, Mercedes can just roll their car next door and, like, set up shop and get that thing going, where McLaren's got to pack it all up and put it in shipping containers and send it out to Germany. And then they've got to fly there. Then they've got to do their own research. And then they got to bring it
Right.
all back. And so that slows down your uh, processes for getting new components to the race car. And so if you can have that on site, which has become a huge deal, I mean, that's awesome. And I think for McLaren, they're going to notice that as well immediately once they have it, and once they have it up and operational. So a lot of stuff happening down at McLaren for sure. They have some big upgrades coming too. Like, they had their big upgrade in Azerbaijan. They have
Yep.
another round of a big upgrade though coming. It's either Austria or Hungary, in around there. They're going to have
Okay.
another really big upgrade for their car, and then they're going to have one more really big one after the summer break. So that's a huge turnover of components, and I think that's all thanks to the regulations, in all honesty.
Well, some good news coming for McLaren fans. I know it's been a bit of a tough year for them for sure. I know I have a few
Hmm.
that listen to this podcast that I know. So there you go from Tim Hauraney. It's looking bright in McLaren's future. Um, Aston Martin, though, as I said, I wanted to get to them and specifically Lance Stroll, who said he was looking forward to getting some maple syrup on his
Hmm.
pancakes at the end of the Spanish Grand Prix. I don't know if you caught that
I
radio
did.
message, but
I
he
was on
always
his
runs
radio
here.
for that race. Like I was listening
Oh, okay, there you
into
go.
his old radio for that race. Yeah, so I caught it at the end. But yeah, it'd be good for him to come back to Canada. I know he misses it here. He's been looking forward to trying to get back here. I spoke with him a couple weeks ago about it, and yeah, he's fired up, man. Like we ended up doing like this huge 20-minute sit down interview with him and Aston Martin, and we built like this really cool feature on TSN that we're going to air next week.
Awesome.
A feature on Lance, but then we also did a bigger feature on Aston Martin as a team as a whole, and I think those are going to come out Monday, Wednesday of the Canadian Grand Prix week, and yeah, it was good to catch up with him again. I mean, I've known Lance for a long time, um, and I think like for him to sustain the injuries that he had sustained before the start of the season, I mean, it was, ooh, boy, he's a tough guy. That's those were some big injuries, and
He gained a lot of
people,
respect, I think, those first
yeah,
couple weekends for sure, especially Bahrain with his
yeah.
performance with that. I absolutely.
Yeah, and the thing is that like these cars aren't like easy to drive. I mean, it's not like your normal road going car where you have this wonderful power steering and you can just, it's nice and cushy and everything feels good. Like these are hard race cars. The environment is extremely harsh. The steering, like the load of the steering is like immense. The amount of brake pressure you need to apply just to slow the car down, I mean, you're talking 300 pounds of force being put into the brake pedal from your left foot. And then same thing goes with the gas pedal as well, because gravity's trying to pull it off and you can't let that happen, so you're leaning on the gas pedal at the same time. And like he had fractures on so many different parts of his body, and it was like, and he wasn't taking um he wasn't taking any like big time painkillers for it either. Like he was like he muscled through that, and like he earned a lot of respect in the paddock for doing that and also putting in a really good performance. And then it's it's like have to let the body recover, but at the same time lost so much time in testing and not
Yeah.
understanding the limits of the car. And normally, what you do for testing, like any racing driver, first time you get into a new car, and once testing rolls around, these are all new cars, you need to understand where the limit of the car is. What will it do? What are its characteristics? So when you take it to the limit, you know what it's going to give you. Like, you're going to get snaps, or like it gives you subtle oversteer, or that it gives you a lot of front push. Like, you just have these understandings with the car that once you take it there, you know what's going to happen. So if you go to like a track like Saudi Arabia, like you can take it to the limit and understand that, hey, when I have this moment, I'm going to be able to bring the car back and it's not going to go straight into the wall. If you look at, we'll use Nicholas Latifi last season in in Saudi Arabia, that car was just so inconsistent on the balance where it was hard to trust and understand what the car was doing. And so you cannot perceive what it's going to do when you take it to the limit. And that's one of the big things with racing and cars is you always have to have your mind in front of the car. You always need to be thinking ahead of the car and understanding and knowing what you're going to do when you get to your reference points and how far you're going to take things, and be prepared for whatever the outcomes are going to be. And so that's how much concentration and thinking you're doing ahead of the race car while you're traveling at 330 kilometers an hour, right? You're literally like trying to look as and think as far ahead as you can. And so I think missing those opportunities in testing is a huge disadvantage to him. And I think, and I've said this before, that it takes multiple races to gain that confidence and to gain that understanding, because you don't get many laps in practice, you don't get many laps in qualifying, you get a lot of laps in racing, but you're also, when you're racing, you're managing, you're not pushing, right? you're
Yeah.
not you're not
And it's
doing
not really the
quality
time
laps.
to test things out
Yeah,
either,
you
you know.
can't. Yeah, and so if you're in practice and you're pushing to the limit, but you don't know what that limit is, or you don't know what the car's, and you stack the car up, you're toast, man. Like, your whole weekend's ruined. You've lost a whole day. You've lost a ton of information. You've lost confidence. So for Lance, it's always been like build up, build up, build up, build up, qualifying, execute, build up, build up, build up, build up, qualifying, execute, kind of thing. And I think that for him, like, that's been that's been what's kept him performing like really well. Like, he is driving really well. Like, he had a rough Monaco Grand Prix. I mean,
Pretty much
that wasn't
anyone who started in the back half of the grid in Monaco Grand Prix had a shocker. So
yeah, but not really. But again, those, like, I'm not trying to make excuses, but not his fault. Like, in Q2, I think it was a piece of Lando's car, like, broke a huge piece of Lance's floor off. And
yeah,
so that's going to put you at such a performance disadvantage, because, like, all of the work is being done by the floor of these race cars. That's where all of the performance is. So if you break it, or it's broken, or something falls off, I mean, you're in a lot of trouble and you're going to lose a ton of performance. And so that's what kept him from advancing and qualifying. And then in the race, yeah, again, like, just it was a disaster for him. And I think coming into Spain, out qualifying Fernando, and, like, I can't remember what I was listening to a podcast, and one of the people were like, "Yeah, Fernando would have out qualified him." I'm like, would he have though? Like, I don't think so. Like, if we take a look at the deltas, like, Alonso lost performance from having a bit of damage to the underfloor of the car, but it wouldn't have been enough to even put him above Lance. So I think that was, like, for Lance in qualifying, that's generally, like, that's him at a good pace. Like, that's him being very competitive. And then same with the race. I mean, I think that the race would have been, like, if they had of, like, let the two of them race, that would have been like something. Like, that would have been a pretty
yeah, at
good
the end there.
battle.
Yeah.
But again, I think he's coming into Canada with a lot of confidence. So is Fernando. Like, it was funny. Like, Fernando at the end of Spain, he was like, what did he say? I'm trying to remember what he said to us. It was like, I think he, like, I don't want to, like, misquote him, but I'm paraphrasing here. But I think he feels that they can claw back a lot of performance to Red Bull. And I think he also feels that for some reason, like, Canada's going to be a good event for them. Like, that's the understanding I took away from it, was that, like, Canada was going to be like a key event for them, and it was going to be a big event for them. And so that got me curious. Like, I wonder, like, are they bringing in a new upgrade for the car, because they need new upgrades on the Aston Martin, like, they just do.
Yeah.
So I hope I didn't talk too much and, like, bore
No,
everybody to death.
I thought the insight
So I
about
think I
Stroll,
just
like
talked for like 10 minutes straight.
the insight about Stroll and testing was, I think, very interesting. You know, we talked about how important it is to understand the car for the team, but also for the drivers. I couldn't imagine how much of a mental game driving is, and I think a lot of people, yeah, exactly. And no, I think all of that was interesting to hear. And I think Canada is an interesting one for Aston Martin because as a team, Stroll has done well here. They were, I think, all right here last year. Of course, completely different car. Alonso was on the front row last
Yeah.
year. So I think this is a weekend where hopefully, like you see them bouncing back.
I do. I think so. Like, I think the car needs to get faster. I don't think it's fast enough anymore. I think that the Ferraris and the Mercedes have already started to claw into their performance gains, and I think Aston Martin needs a big upgrade. Not, I don't want to say like monumentally big, but, like, I would say they need a fair performance upgrade to the car, and they need it relatively soon if they kind of want to keep this top three battle going for them, or else I could see them falling to fourth, and then
It's
that's where I
funny.
could see them. So it's
it's funny how we're talking about them like, oh, they need to be getting second now. We're at the beginning, like this is already a win, right? It's kind of funny that
100%.
the expectations have completely changed, and the
100%.
people within the team have said that as well, right?
Yeah.
So it is kind of funny, and I think it's been said many times at this point how the expectations from race one have completely changed for the team, which
And
is awesome for them, and I'm
exciting
hoping that
too. Like if you're a Canadian or, I mean, it's Canadian owned, like it, I don't want to say it's a Canadian team. I mean,
no,
obviously it's a British team, but like it's owned by Canadian, right? It's got a Canadian driver. I'm like, I'm
it's probably the most Canadian team
I would say
if
like
there was one, right?
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it's great. I think it's fantastic for our country, and I think it's yeah, I love it, man. I think it's so cool because and like granted, like where they were last season, it's just a great story. Like constructors standings P7, they were at some points like whatever it was P9 P10, and they managed to claw their way up to P7 and then second place in the constructors standings for a while this season. It's like that's a huge turnaround. I don't know any other team in the history of the sport that's like had that turnaround.
Yeah, if you look back to Australia last year, people were saying they were the worst car in the grid.
Oh
And
yeah,
I think by the end of the year, they were actually almost to the back of McLaren and Alpine already. Like
yeah,
their development throughout the year was
yeah.
sensational. And then the car that they bring to the beginning of this year, people in testing were like trying to, I think, measure their expectations, but everyone was like, this looks really promising. And then we saw it play out, of course, with Alonso's great drive and, of course, Stroll with severely compromised wrists taking the car to where he did. So it's been an incredible year for them. But I want to get to some predictions for the Canadian Grand Prix. But first, I wanted to just open it up to you if there's any storylines that you're excited to see play out in Canada and what we can expect from your coverage. I know you've teased a few things already.
So gonna be doing like a very TSN heavy. So which is awesome. All in this year. There's going to be a ton of stuff on TSN social, ton of stuff on their digital, and then also a ton of stuff on Sports Center as well. I'll be on some social stuff, and I'll be on quite a bit of the TV side. Like you'll be seeing my face a lot on that side. Um, so yeah, on that point, like really excited for that. Have like a ton of really cool driver one-on-one interviews. I don't want to spoil that we've got lined. I was able to get us um, some big names, so it's going to be a lot of fun. I have to sit down with some pretty big people like when I get there. So I'm very excited and grateful for the opportunity from the teams to come to me with some of the stuff that come to me with. It's been great. But yeah, you want to check everything out on tsn.ca for sure. Same with their social channels. And then obviously you want to watch Sports Center as well. There's going to be lots of stuff there. And their YouTube channel too. There's going to be lots of stuff on there as well. Predictions.
After
I don't
Max, of
know.
course.
Yeah, I think what would be odd. Like, if it'd be great if there's going to be rain for the. I know, like it's tough for me to sit here and say like I hope it rains during the race, but like it's bad for me if it rains during the race because I'm gonna get soaked at the same time. It's like I think it really spice things up a lot with the race, but I absolutely love watching drivers absolutely send it through the wall of champions. Like in qualifying is one of my favorite things. And for the race, I would say I'm gonna say Verstappen is gonna win, and followed closely though by Carlos Sainz and Lance Stroll
Again,
third.
okay. All right,
I say Lance third. I say Lance gets a
love
podium in
that.
Canada.
Love that. And can anyone take pole position other than Max?
No, it's Max for sure.
Okay, okay.
I not I mean not unless Ferrari like just decides like hell with it. We're going all in on one lap pace. Go.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I would have Max pull and win as well. I feel like Sergio's got to get back up there to P2 at some point. He's had a bit of a
Yeah.
rough stretch. But I'm with you. I'm fully back in Lance Stroll P3 this weekend. So I love that
What
prediction from you.
What do you think's going on with like what's going on with Sergio Bradley? What's up? What's up there? What's happening? What do you
What's
think?
I don't know. I just think he's up against a complete beast of a driver. Max Verstappen is so damn good. And I think what Christian Horner actually said at the end of the Spanish Grand Prix was very interesting, where he said now he's got nothing to lose and he should be performing better. Because I do think I'll say this: the mistakes in qualifying to me are a little bit unforgivable, especially Monaco Q1. That is in a Red Bull to do that is a little crazy to me. I know I'm just watching from the stands here, and it's not easy to do what they do, but to crash it in Q1 in Monaco is a pretty massive mistake in a Red Bull that's so dominant. Um, I think he just has so much to go up against, and as much as he wants to push off that pressure, I feel like he has to be feeling it if he really does want to bring a championship home to Mexico.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I think Miami was a turning point. I mean, for
Oh
Sergio, it's
yeah.
always like he's always been so great with tires. And I think that's kind of what gave him a bit of an advantage at the beginning of the season is just having like that solid foundation of understanding of tires. And once he got into the race, Max and Sergio were on the alternate strategies. And we really saw like Max claw his way through the field. And while Sergio was on another tire, Max was on a different tire as well. And then once that strategy sort of kicked in and Max was able to like extend some things and do a few things differently that Sergio couldn't do, I think that's Sergio was I think Sergio was rattled by that. I really
Yeah,
do. And I think that's what kind of set off what we saw happen in Monaco. And then again in Spain, same sort of thing. Like that car should have been P2 in Spain. I mean, you have to wonder, like, if that was Max in that car and starting where Sergio started, would Max have won?
it's exactly what I said on my podcast. I
Yeah,
said there's no way in hell Max Verstappen's not going P1 or P. If he's against himself, he's going P2. And if he is there and Sergio's in one, positions are flipped. He's
yeah,
probably winning that race. To start behind a Mercedes or start ahead of a Mercedes, sorry, and finish behind it
yeah,
is something Max Verstappen would never do. Of course, that's all hypothetical, but I'm pretty sure everyone agrees that that would be the case, right?
yeah, yeah. I think so. I mean, I think for Sergio, you said it best. Where like he's up against Max Verstappen at his best, but he's not up against Max Verstappen at 100% Max Verstappen. Like we saw 100% Max Verstappen Q3 final push third sector Max Verstappen. That was 100%, and that's one of the greatest third sectors at Monaco you are ever going to see in your life. Incredible. Like
It
no one
was
could have done that.
incredible.
There was I don't know any driver on the grid right now who could have done that. Like even Alonso was like, like
Well, the Aston was struggling a bit in Sector 3, though, I think what he said, right? So
a bit,
Alonso
but
was very quick, and then that's where
he
they
he
kind of were a
clawed
bit slow.
he clawed back almost 3/10 Bradley in the third sector.
In the shortest sector.
Like, yeah, like that's it was
Well, it was
mindset
his
of like this thing's coming home in a ball or I'm gonna get pulled.
that almost the entire 3/10 was made up with his commitment through the swimming pool chicane.
He
I'm pretty sh
actually he made up about a tenth through that swimming pool section, and then about he made up half no he made up another tenth heading into um second last corner and then
s-
in the braking zone there, and then he made
yeah,
up he made up another tenth on the very last corner on the exit by like being committed to the power sooner than
hitting the
anyone
wall.
else. But he bounced off of one wall into another. Like the car was literally pointed at a wall. He was flat out. No one else did that. Like,
Yeah, no, the amount of commitment through that entire sector
yeah,
was incredible, and it really does seem like only he can do something like that. He is super max, as they call him, and
yeah,
he's certainly he's showing it this year. It's incredible.
yeah,
Um, yeah, the Miami performance, as you said, was also
yeah.
just ridiculous. I uh, definitely backed Paris to win that weekend once I
Oh yeah,
saw
for
P9. I
sure.
was like, oh, Max will get P2. I had
Yeah.
all the confidence in the world that Max would get P2. I did actually think a race win was out of the question.
Oh yeah, me too.
Um,
I said it on TSN. I said it on Sports Center. I'm like, yeah, I don't think he's winning this one. That's just way too much of an ask. And then like he goes
yeah,
and wins. And I'm like,
yeah,
I didn't do
ridiculous. But
that.
anyway, Tim, we've done an hour here. I really appreciate your time. I think this is a great preview to the Canadian Grand Prix. Really looking forward to it. Any last words?
Yeah, no, I mean, head on over to tsn.ca, their auto racing page. We're going to have a lot of stuff coming out there. There's a lot of stuff there now that we've already built. So, yeah, tsn.ca, their auto racing page or their Formula One page. A lot of fun stuff on there. Also, SDPN as well. Check out the podcast, Nailing the Apex. You can get me on social media at Tim Hauraney. Bradley, thanks again, man, for doing this. Really appreciate it. Happy to see that you're keeping your podcast going. That is great. Good for you.
Absolutely, fully
And what have
committed.
you
We're
got
flat
going on?
out.
I saw
We're
you
flat
got
out.
what you're on the air now, eh?
Yeah, yeah, I work for City
Nice.
News Kitchener.
Good for you.
So
That's great.
yeah, Rogers family, your TSN. I don't know. It's no, I'm just kidding.
No, that's good,
But
man. Good for you. That's good. I'm happy for you. I'm happy you got that opportunity. That's great. How did that come about?
I think when we were speaking last, I either was no, I wouldn't have been in school. I think I probably had my job in Woodstock. I was working at an FM station.
You were.
Um, yeah, okay. So um I basically just was kind of looking all throughout the time I was there, and I saw this opportunity come up and applied. It was really as simple as that. It wasn't any connection. I mean, I kind of had a bit of help, I guess, from a former teacher of mine at Fanshawe College, who used to be a news director here, and I messaged her on LinkedIn and was like, "Hey, um, is there any like tips in getting this job?" So I mean, I guess there was that bit of help, but yeah, no, it was a pretty normal way of getting the job, and now I've been there 4 months or so, and yeah, really enjoying it. I've got a lot of
Nice.
experience as a reporter, which is the most important thing, as you probably know.
Yeah, for sure. Like, what are you learning the most?
Uh it's hard to say. I guess it's just everything, you know. So many things can be thrown at you being a reporter. I'm pretty much always doing news. I don't get to venture into sports too much, which I would love to do, but um it is what it is. And I just think that though the experience and what I've learned throughout my time there so far in only 4 months is has been immense. Like going out to an event and covering it seems like it could be the same every time, but in reality, so many different events have different challenges, and I'm sure you know, even just going from race to race or something, it's just like they're not all the same, even though at the end of the day, you're still covering a race. And the more you do it, the better you get. It's all about getting those reps.
Yeah, 100%. Good for you, man. Congratulations. It's great. Happy to
Yeah.
see that.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
good
Really
stuff.
appreciate it. And as always, appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks again for having me, Bradley. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah. All right. Take care. What a great conversation with Tim. I always appreciate his time. Again, I'm someone who is so gracious with his time as well. And I really liked the insight that he had about Lance Stroll's kind of journey. And I really look forward to the piece from TSN. Not sure if it's out yet. But if it is, I haven't seen it, and I look forward to watching that. I'm sure it'll be a great job because Tim always does a great job. A friend of the podcast, I have to support him. But since this is a preview, I can't leave you guys without Brad's bets. Of course, we're still doing it. It doesn't matter that we just had an hour conversation. I'm still giving you the picks for the weekend. But first, we have to review my picks from Spain. Just quickly, I had both Red Bull drivers to finish on the podium. Perez was a massive letdown for me there, so that was a no. But I did hit on Max's double. Yes, I had him fastest in qualifying and to win the race. Of course, he had a grand slam, so that was an even bigger opportunity. But It's hard to predict when that happens, especially when Checo should be in Max's pit window, but not this race. I absolutely hammered over 17.5 drivers classified, and again, we had all 20 drivers finish the race. And I think that you just have to keep taking advantage of the odds the sports books are giving you on how many drivers are going to finish the race until they adjust it accordingly, because reliability has been bulletproof this year. I had amount of leaders in the race being 2, because I thought that Perez would be in the pit window, he would lead the race momentarily, and then Max would drive off into the distance, right? And it was only 1 leader, so I missed on that one, and then on both my long shots of the week, I missed on those as well. I didn't really have anything crazy. I think it was just Piastri points, which isn't even really a long shot. But anyway, this week, the kind of more basic bets that you can find on FanDuel, I have only 3 of those. And one of them is basically, I'm going to just break it down for you. Do you believe in the Mercedes upgrades? If you do, take Lewis to finish on the podium for minus 115. I still think that's a bit risky because he does have George Russell to contend with, and then if there's only that one spot left in the podium because Perez and Verstappen are up there, then that does make it a little bit difficult. But still, Lewis has always done well in Canada. He had the better of George last year in Canada. I would back him to finish ahead of George here. And I am someone who's very high on George Russell. I think he will come back in the second half of the season and close that gap to Lewis at the moment. He's just had some bad luck, I think. But anyway, point is, I like Lewis in Canada over George. And if you do believe in those Mercedes upgrades and that they've taken a big step, and Aston Martin is still a step behind because they haven't brought that big performance upgrade yet, then I think you take Lewis. But the reason I'm breaking it down this way is because the odds for Alonso are the exact same. Minus 115. So if you think the Mercedes performance in Spain was a bit of a one-track wonder, kind of similar to last year where they were fast in Spain, and then in Canada they, I think, were like 40 seconds behind until the safety car came out, then take Alonso for minus 115, because I really think that the Aston Martin performance in Spain was, I would say it was a bit of an outlier. I think they are better than what their performance looked like in Spain. I am very puzzled still by why they weren't quick there. But I do believe that Alonso, even though Stroll is really good here, and we did have Stroll on the podium for our predictions, I just think Alonso is just a lot to contend with. And like we said, he was in the front row last year. He's spectacular here. So take Alonso for minus 115 if you don't believe in Mercedes. Basically, if you're on the fence, then maybe just avoid it altogether because it's not like the odds are that great. And instead, take Lance Stroll for a top 6 finish. Yes, top 6 finish for Lance Stroll. I think he's only done that once this year. I'm not even sure if he's done it once. Bahrain, I think he was 7th, right? Or maybe he was 6th. No, I think he was 6th in Bahrain because of the Leclerc retirement, and Russell was P7. So, yeah, he's only done it once all year, but I really do feel like Stroll had a bit of a comeback race in Spain, and now he is set. Or actually, did he finish P6 in Spain? I think he actually did, so I'm crazy thinking all the way back to the first race. But anyway, point is, I think he's back. He always does do well here. He's going to want to do well here. I think that he can get in that top 6, and especially if Ferrari still doesn't really know what was going on with Leclerc's car, there might be an issue there. Who knows? I do like plus 150 for Lance Stroll, top 6 here, so you can go after that. I'm looking for redemption also on both Red Bulls on the podium. Perez cannot continue to miss the podium. If he does a 3rd consecutive race off the podium, yeah, I think so, right? Monaco, Spain, Canada. If he does that 3 times in a row in this Red Bull, that is just absolutely shocking. So for minus 138, pretty decent odds. You're not quite doubling your money, but it's close. I do like Red Bull both having both cars in the podium again for the first time in way too long. But anyway, take that one because the odds for this will probably be, they won't be this low until the second half of the season and some other cars catch up if that even happens. And then I think a no-brainer here is to take one of these two, if not both. Take the over 18.5 drivers to finish the race. That is plus 240. Those are some fantastic odds for something that has happened quite a few times this year. However, you only need 2 cars to retire, 1 collision. Retirements seem inevitable at this point. They haven't happened in forever. So, of course, there is still some risk there, but history is on our side here. We are getting a lot of drivers finishing the race, so take advantage of it until we have a reason to not bet on this. And then also no safety car period. We haven't had a safety car since Australia, I don't think. So plus 175 for that. We could still have 3 retirements, but no safety car come out because they just pull into the pits. That's what happened in Monaco. So there you go. Plus 175 for that as well. And then the long shot of the week, of course, is backing Tim and I's prediction for Lance Stroll to finish on the podium. The best of the rest after Red Bull, Lance Stroll would be insane. But it's plus 1,600 for someone who does well here and is in arguably the second fastest car. It is still pretty decent odds. I think it's more likely to happen than someone who should be 1,600. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not, but that's why it's a long shot of the week. So there you go, plus 1,600. If any weekend Lance Stroll is going to finish on the podium actually on merit, it is this weekend, and I do back Aston Martin to have a bit of a comeback weekend. But anyway, those are my picks for the week. That will do it for episode 58 of Brake Bias. I'm your host, Brad Kramer, and I will be back with episode 59 Monday to review the Canadian Grand Prix. I hope you really enjoyed this chat with Tim as much as I did. I feel like I like talking to him more every time I do. So yeah, let's hope for a Lance Stroll podium. Goodbye.